Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Black Girl Ambition with me, Nia Baxter. This is your go to space for community empowerment and practical tips to help you level up in your career and in all aspects of your life. Here, we have real conversations about navigating corporate careers, about entrepreneurship, about wellness and Black womanhood. I like to describe Black Girl Ambition as equal parts executive level coffee chat meets sister circle meets motivational masterclass. Black Girl Ambition is not just a podcast, it is a community and a movement. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite streaming platform. And if you love the mission and the message, please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and also share it with a friend. It really does help. If you have a guest or topic suggestions, I would love to hear from you. I always take those into consideration. Okay, ambitious Black girls, get excited because today we are speaking with Fadjanie Cadet. If you have ever walked into a room and realized that no one handed you a manual, no one explained the acronyms, the politics, the chess moves, and you had to figure it out on your own and in real time, this episode is for you. Fadjanie is a Chief Change Experience Officer, an organizational strategist, and future of work leader whose work sits at the intersection of culture, capability, and transformation. She has led global culture and learning initiatives at companies like Forrester and Wayfair and LEK Consulting, helping organizations operationalize inclusion and to build change agility and prepare leaders for a rapidly shifting world. She is the author of In First Place, an ebook on how to win over first generation professionals with your inclusion strategy, and the creator of the Impact Model and CCXO Playbook, frameworks that are designed to move culture work beyond performative statements and into measurable transformation. Fadjanie is also a proud first generation Haitian American leader, and she brings a powerful lens to the professional experience. This is one that acknowledges how identity and access and unspoken rules shape the way that we move through corporate spaces. In this episode, we are going to talk about the green years, those years when we really didn't know anything and we were quite naive, the unwritten rules, the hidden gaps that so many first generation professionals internalize as personal failures as opposed to structural failures. This is a conversation about visibility and about power in designing workplaces that truly account for the full human experience. If you've ever felt like you were learning the rules while the game was already in motion, you're going to feel deeply seen in this conversation today. Fadjanie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Naya. What a great introduction. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here and love the platform that you've built.
Thank you so much. And shout out to my cousin and your friend Jonathan Roberts for
Yes.
introducing us.
Shout out to Jonathan.
Yes, he's amazing. Okay, so I want to get started this conversation with understanding a bit about you because there's so much that I already shared in your intro and want to begin to unpack it a bit. Can you tell us more about a little bit of color around your upbringing? Maybe some of the formative experiences that built you.
Yeah, absolutely. So both my parents are immigrants from Haiti who migrated to this country prior to, building their family. So that's sort of been like the Haitian identity, the culture, the music, the food. That's foundational to who I am and so much a part what I'm bringing and sharing with my son moving forward. I grew up as a middle child, but older sister in my home, which I think coupled with the first generation American identity really meant that it was shaping my sense of responsibility very early. I was doing a lot in translating, connecting, making sense of to your intro of things that my family was not aware of. And so that's really been the foundation for me. I think growing up, education was more than just a path, right? Like it was security. It was security. It
Mhm.
was stability. That's what it was synonymous with. It was not an optional, path in my household and in my upbringing. It was sort of necessary fulfillment. There was a strong emphasis in my household on professionalism, respectability, doing things the quote right way, doing things the right way. And I think I watched my immigrant parents navigate systems without a roadmap, all of the systems, being in a country that was not familiar, navigating language that was not familiar, roles and industries, all of those things. And as I mentioned, that shaped my sense of responsibility early. And it also, I think, began to plant the seeds for how success was defined. Success was framed around stability, education, and this narrative that sacrifice would pay off.
Very much so. And so much of that resonates as first gen, even not being having the immigrant identity. A lot of those lessons that you learn are definitely consistent. So you're growing up as a child and figuring that out just as a child growing up and a Black child growing up in America, also an immigrant child, and you're helping your parents to navigate the world around them. That's just a very interesting position to be in.
It is. It's a very interesting position. And I think reflecting on it now, in the moment, it just felt like status quo, right? Like this is just what it was. Now reflecting back, I think how heavy was that? For me now, I can recognize the weight. At the time, I did not recognize the weight. It didn't feel like weight. It just felt like this were. And now I think now that I'm older and I'm in the position of being a parent, imagine I would not want my son to have to do all of those things. Or I've built a life in a way that he does not have to assume those things. But I did not feel that way during that moment. I was just this was what was done. If they didn't understand something, I translated. If they didn't have the answer or someone to connect me with, I went out and found it. That's how that worked. But as you mentioned, it's interesting to be in living in a society as a marginalized person, living in a place of disadvantage and trying to create opportunities and make connections, and the path to advantages being sort of told to me by my parents, taking what they said and trying to connect it to what they didn't know and trying to create that narrative. Like, yes, I know you said this, but here is what that actually looks like in real life. Like, here's what it means to walk that path and navigate. And sometimes there were tensions with that for sure, but it's certainly an interesting way to grow up and responsibility to assume early.
Absolutely. You were a bridge in many ways and how you've described it. And it's interesting because I think as first gen, going back to what you were saying about motherhood
Hmm.
and the way that you're raising your son differently, I think it's first gen having so many of those responsibilities, so much weight being put on you. I was going to ask about how your approach to motherhood has been impacted by that experience because I'd say, like, even growing up very similarly, again, not from the immigrant perspective, but a lot of that
Yeah.
responsibility being placed on me. And in raising my children, I've been very intentional about not putting that responsibility on them,
Hmm.
not making I have two children, older daughter, younger son, and being so intentional about ensuring that she doesn't feel like his mother.
Hmm.
She doesn't feel like she has to parent him, and that she and he both, like, are able to be free and living and growing in their childhood and those experiences, and I think that that's a privilege, like, so much of that is a privilege
Absolutely.
that I am very thankful to be able to do, but it's just interesting, like, when you have the experience of being so responsible, how you then interpret that for your own children when you have.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance. And I think so much of what you're saying in terms of like big sister not feeling like they're mothering, right? As someone who is a big sister, that resonates with me. I think I'm in a unique position where I only have one son for now. But I think one of the things that I'm hyper aware of, and I say to him often when he says, Mama, I have to do XYZ. And I say, well, you don't have to do anything. Like, you don't have to do that. You can. I think it's nice. I think it's good. Here's what, going to school does for you. Like, here's what being responsible does for you. Here's why we clean up after ourselves, like kind of connecting the why and anchoring it, but never in my language, at least. He's very young still, but not in my language, subconsciously putting responsibility on him too early. Having a sense of responsibility early could be advantageous in many ways, right? And so that I think, as he grows up, I'll definitely want to implement, but it is something that I'm hyper aware of is be cautious of the language that I use and conscious of how I mother, so that there are already a lot of pressures that he is going to experience in life, just being an American, being a Black boy who will grow up to be a Black man. And so how can I help not only mediate, but not add on to those pressures early.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that success to your parents also looked like respectability.
Mhm.
Did respectability for them, was that assimilation to so-called American culture? What did that look?
Yeah, so when I say I think to a certain extent, but I think when I say respectability, it's tied to that, like, doing the right thing, not ruffling feathers. I think someone who is without a roadmap, when you're someone who's coming from a place of disadvantage and you're on this path to get more, learn more, gain access, become very aware very early that you don't want to ruffle feathers or put too much attention on yourself. And I think respectability has, or at least for me growing up, was synonymous with not too much attention. Or if it is attention, let it be in alignment with whatever the perceived stereotype or the prototype of the person that they want you to be. Let it be in alignment with that and not the other. And so, interesting because I was just having a conversation with my cousin recently. One of the things I'm incredibly grateful for is in our household growing up, my parents were not the type to say like, stay in a child's place or grown folks are speaking here, which I think definitely has influenced sort of who I've grown up to be and also how I navigate corporate environments. I will challenge, I'll ask the question, I'll say if something doesn't make sense to me, which I learned can be received differently, but at the same time, they nurtured that within the home and family dynamics and conversations. But early on in career, if I said like, I don't want to have to do this, or someone at work is treating me this way, or I should be asking for way more money in this salary negotiation, they're like, be grateful, be humble, don't go too far now. And that's what I mean about respectability. I think respectability has meant or did mean navigate in alignment with expectation and always be humble and deeply grateful. And one of the things I've learned over time is that you can be humble and still be an advocate, a self advocate and champion. Like those two things can coexist. But early on, that was something that I had to figure out.
Percent. Would you say that you were always ambitious, or was that something that developed for you over time?
I think I always was. And I think that it could just be being someone who was, first generation and understanding that the opportunities that I had, parents did not have. And so that responsibility that was put on me early sort of fostered the ambition. It was ambition and drive. I would say it always existed. Perhaps what has happened as I, built my career is the root cause of that ambition has shifted. I think I was ambitious, and before it was ambitious for my family, ambitious for the legacy, ambitious as a form of giving back to the sacrifices. And then when I started to build my career, I became ambitious for me. I think it's always existed, but I think the sort of driving factors has been influenced over time.
So when you think about the younger version of
Mhm.
yourself that is entering corporate
Yeah.
America, what did she not know yet?
Oh, she didn't know anything. Like, let's start there. She didn't know anything because no one did this before me. I had, just graduated from college. I knew the things that they teach you in school around, how to dress for corporate America and like the technical skills, but that was about it. I walked in there what I would say is blindly. I think some of the things that younger me did not understand yet. I thought corporate success was purely merit based,
Girl, didn't we all?
right?
Didn't we all?
I believe that being excellent would automatically like lead to visibility. I think that I also didn't realize how much informal power, proximity, relationships, and perception really shaped opportunities. And I realized that what was fit, like culture fit, the things that became norms, the things that were normal, the people sometimes who were, hailed as the best leaders, that sort of culture fit came from familiarity and not necessarily always and only capability.
So well said. You entered the workforce thinking, I just have to be smart and I just have to work hard
Yep.
and all of these other things.
Fall into my lap.
Did you have a first, I didn't get the memo kind of moment at work? Are there any particular experiences that you can pinpoint when you were like, wait, I didn't get that memo?
I mean, there are like the silly things. I've sent often the story of like the first time I heard the phrase coffee chat and feeling like, well, I don't drink coffee. So what
I don't
do
drink
I do in
coffee.
this moment? Like, I'm like, I'm not even a coffee drinker. So
Right.
should I go? Should I not go? Should I pretend to drink coffee?
Heard that
Right?
before from folks. I'm like, you don't have to drink. It doesn't
It's an
have to
idiom, right? Like it really just means like we're just chatting. We're just catching up. I'm like, well, I wish you would just say that so I didn't have the anxiety build up. So there are like some of those things, right? Like the acronyms and learning. But I'll say one of the in this moment, what's becoming real for me is in my first job ever. I remember I had been there for some time, and um, I felt like I deserved a promotion. Like I wanted more money, and I remember having the conversation with my then manager about it, and him saying to me, "Well, I need you to build a business case." And in my mind, I was like, "Well, you know me. I work for you. You know everything that I'm doing and how I'm contributing. What do you want from me? Right? Like what else do I need to do?" And I think that's where we talk about like, no, self-advocacy is so critically visibility, being able to articulate clearly your narrative is so critically important to navigating success in these landscapes. And so I was like, oh, I get it. So even if I report to you and you know how I contribute and you are giving me this great feedback, if I'm not proactively communicating what I want, what I believe I deserve, tying my work to business outcomes and packaging that in a way that it cannot be ignored, then I will continue to not get the things that I deserve. And that was an aha moment for me. And I remember at the time kind of feeling discouraged by the request. I ended up going through with it, and thankfully I got the promotion. Everything was great. But thinking back now, it's an exercise that I am incredibly grateful for because it set the stage for, oh, this is how I'm going to move moving forward. And it was a practice in building your own narrative, right? Which I think is critically important to navigating uncharted territory.
Absolutely. I was actually going to say that your boss telling you that you needed to create a business case was actually a gift to you,
Absolutely.
because what could have happened is he would have not said anything. He would have gone ahead
Mhm,
and told the uppers that she didn't create a business case for me, so we didn't promote her, without telling you that that was what he needed or what the
mhm.
requirement was. So that was actually a gift and something you were able to use going forward.
Absolutely. Reflecting back, I'm so grateful for that experience because it really gave me a tool that I continue to use in my career today.
Mhm. Did you ever internalize those gaps of not knowing as like personal shortcomings? Did you see
Absolutely.
them as structural or
So
personal?
it's interesting. I think early in my career I did when but the acronyms were code for when I there were certain things or tools that my peers were proficient in that I was learning for the first time, relationships that people had that I didn't have. They definitely felt like personal shortcomings. And then I think I started to have conversations with people like you, Naya, in the workplace. Is how intersectional the first gen identity was. People who did not look like me, whose parents were born in this country, who, came from different walks of life. We're all sort of sharing this. We're in this space for the first time experience, and everyone thinks that things are implied and they're not. People think things are explicit and they're not. And so it was then that I really started to reframe the question from what am I missing to what are these systems missing? Because it ain't just me. It is not just me. And that I think is where the inspiration came for the ebook in first place. I had, from a career perspective, I was leading in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work. And so much of the conversations were being driven by how do you identify? Who are you? And how does your identity impact your employee experience? And this significant part of not only my employee experience, but many of my peers' employee experience was not core to the conversation. And so when I looked at the landscape, there are a bunch of books out there that exist on how to support first gen professionals in those unspoken and unwritten roles. Like, let me give you all the tips. And in my book, the audience isn't necessarily the first gen professional. It's the DEI practitioner, the HR leader, the engagement leader who want to create a space of belonging, a space where all employees can thrive. This is like, what do you need to do? Because there's probably more of us than you think there are. And instead of going with the implicit, let's make things explicit. Here's how you can integrate, um, the first gen experience into your inclusion, into your employee engagement strategy so that it's all encompassing, so that you're meeting everyone where they are.
Give me an example of some of the ways that organizations can bake that in.
Yeah. So the first thing is with the onboarding experience, like that culture onboarding. And I've seen this evolve so much over time. And so many organizations are doing this very well, but a lot of organizations still are not. But it's thinking about, I think a good practice for any organization is to lay out your culture on a whiteboard, use the sticky notes. And on one side, all of the things that are listed in your onboarding decks, on your website, right? And on the walls in the rooms, right? Your core values, all of the things that are explicitly stated. And then on the left side, put all the sticky notes with all of those implicit messages, the things that no one knows about until you're walking through the door, the language, the acronyms that only we use here, the way of working that is distinctive to us. And take those things and figure out how you can proactively share them as part of the onboarding experience. Let's take the guesswork out. Let's not require that folks be here for 30, 60, 90 days before they have that aha moment. How can we build that aha moment into the toolkit of like how to be successful here really early on? So that's one way that I talk about. The other thing that I talk about is building in some of those like soft skills, right? When I say I didn't know anything transitioning to corporate America, when I didn't know how important self-advocacy would be throughout the journey. It's continued to be critical. And for some of us who are from backgrounds or have been a part of societies where we've been told to not rustle feathers, don't be too loud, don't brag too much, keep it a bit quiet, advocating for yourself, sharing your accomplishments, tracking your accomplishments may not come naturally. And so how can we create that as part of our capability building strategy intentionally from a learning perspective? I think it's looking at employee benefits and wellness. And I've seen over the years, we've gotten so great, right? So many organizations have rethought the way that they think about employee benefits to include the wellness of an employee, like their emotional, mental, psychological capacity. And I say the same thing goes from a financial perspective. Are we intentionally creating a financial awareness, making sure folks understand their benefits, not only as it relates to their physical health, but their financial health and estate planning, future planning, legacy building? Because for folks who don't come from a background where they had the opportunity to even consider some of these things, how can we be a bit more intentional? And so I think all of those things fall under the umbrella of let's not assume anything and let's intentionally give folks everything that they need to be successful, regardless of where they're coming
Yes, that's how you infuse
from.
equity into a system.
Hmm.
The other one I would add is around networking,
Hmm.
like the power of building networks with people, because you had mentioned earlier about that invisible like
Yeah.
power from proximity through relationships. And so creating intentional ways for professionals who are first gen
Hmm.
or just entering a company to network with people who are either more tenured or more senior or in a different part of the
Yeah.
company, being intentional about exposure as well.
Apps networking. And it's interesting because when you're in business school, networking is sort of, it sounds like this really like tactical thing that you need to do when you shake hands and you wear a suit and tie and you go to these events and you say, hi, my name is. And I think real networking, or another word for it, is like community and community building. And how do you create a community outside of the folks that you grew up with, right? Like your friends, or what you call your day ones. I call your network your day twos. And I say all the time, my day twos have shown up for me in ways that I could not imagine. But I've been really intentional in building that community around me. And I didn't think that way before. And so absolutely you're right. Like there is that awareness of the individual and understanding the value of that, but organizations also have the responsibility to create that. I think there's two sort of things there. There's the individual acknowledging and understanding the value of connections, which naturally happens over time as you're navigating your career. But certainly it is the responsibility of organizations to make intentional connections because so much of what happens from an internal mobility perspective is influenced by proximity and visibility.
So much. And opportunity is insular so many
Mhm,
times. It's like
mhm.
who I know, who's closest to me, who I've worked with before. And so that's why networking is and community building, to your point, are just so critical.
Absolutely. I always say it doesn't matter what you know. No one knows you know it. Like, that's great. You know all the things, but who knows you to be able to vouch for you, advocate, and make those connections?
100%. So when we were prepping, we had our first call a couple of months.
Huh?
You said that your first generation identity sometimes feels louder to you and stronger to you than
Uh-huh.
your gender and
Yeah.
corporate spaces. What did you mean by that?
I've been privileged to have grown up in a place where while I was, a Black woman, I was surrounded by a lot of Black women. I was in a community where racial, ethnic, gender minorities were the majority. And so I do think that has shaped sort of who I am and what I believe of myself and also maybe how I operate in certain environments. And so because of that, I navigate in corporate spaces. I mentioned how I grew up and my parents fostering that speak up if something isn't making sense or doesn't sound right. And so some of those stereotypes that exist around women in the workplace, I did not ascribe to. Also, when I think about being a Black person in the workplace, I also felt that, but the unknowing, the things that felt the furthest from my experience, all were rooted in being a first gen professional, like not having the insight, not having the roadmap, not having the language. Really, those were the things that influenced my decisions from a career perspective. Those things that I did decide and those decisions that I didn't make, those risks that I didn't take came from a lack of awareness and knowledge that I've attributed to my first gen identity more than anything else.
So you were having all of these experiences, making sense of the corporate world early on. When did you begin to put language to that experience?
I think the language didn't come until I was doing the work. I've worn many a hats. I've done everything from an HR perspective. And it wasn't until I was really doing DEIB work regularly that the language, I was equipped with the language. And that was really the catalyst for the book and the continuing conversations, because that's when I realized, oh, this is what psychological safety or a lack thereof looks like when we're talking about access and equity. This is what was missing. Like this is where this came from. Inclusion and belonging and not feeling a part of, even when maybe we look similar or came from the same school educational background, but something feels like I don't belong. What is that thing? That's where I think the catalyst for a lot of that came from, and where I was really armed with some language to be able to tie to my experience.
That resonates a lot because as someone who has done legacy DEI work over a number of years, I'd say that I didn't really start to be able to crystallize it into my experiences into language and have words to put to those experiences until I was doing the work. Work is deeply meaningful for so many reasons because of the impact, but it was also like therapy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could not agree more with that. Could not agree more with that. Which is why I think for many folk in the recent years, with sort of the shift around the conversation around that work, why it's been so challenging. Outside of the economic, financial, sustainability pieces of it, it's that this work is deeply meaningful. It is so closely tied to identity and culture and personal and lived experience, right? And so feeling in those moments that, geez, like an attack on the work feels like,
An attack on
a direct attack on me and who I am. And so how do I reconcile with those feelings?
Yes, that's a perfect transition to the next portion of this conversation I want to have about when the work disappears. I understand that your role was eliminated in a ripple effect from the executive orders that came down early last year. Talk to me a little bit more about that. What was that moment like for you? And did you internalize any part of that as your worth, as part of your worth when you got the news?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just a job ending for all of the reasons that we just said. It felt like a significant disruption to purpose and identity, right? When your work centers, I'll say when your work is human centered,
Mhm.
sometimes structural shifts can feel deeply personal. And so that transition, that moment of expansion, as I've chosen to call it, really forced me to separate who I am from where I sit organizationally, but also to be a lot sharper about storytelling and my narrative, right?
Same.
I think it's Shonda Brown Duckett who says, the CEO for TIAA, she has this quote that I've seen and heard many times where she says, you rent your job title,
But you
but you own your character. And I would say you also own your narrative. That narrative is yours. And so I think, particularly in a time where there were false narratives, inconsistencies around what this work really was and has been, or what the work I was doing was and had been, it felt like a responsibility to rethink the role and the work beyond traditional titles and really step into what is the impact that I've had and how do I lead with that? That's really what I think the time gifted me,
Mm.
was the moment without distractions, right? With meeting priorities, to sit and think about my career story at a high level, the impact that I've made, and what were the common threads across the work, recalibrating with honesty about what that looked like, and understanding that my job and the role that I had in organizations had always been someone who bridges culture, strategy, and human transformation. So you
Like
can add what
person.
Yep. So you can add whatever acronym, words, or titles you want, but that is really the core to the work, and that season is what really helped me step into this identity of the CCXO, right? Or the Chief Change Experience Officer, because I learned that my value didn't come from a specific job description, but the frameworks, the way of thinking, the human centered strategy, and the lived experience that I bring to the work that allows me to drive meaningful. And I would offer that as a reflection and maybe some solace or some encouragement for anyone who's listening who might be in a season of expansion, is think of it of that way. How do I think expansively about who I am and what I've done, and not be limiting, not allow society or a job or a company to tell you who you are, but take that time to reflect intentionally. I think the first gen experience teaches you to pivot, to be open, to continue to want to learn and grow. And that's really what has, I think, been the foundation that has carried me through this expansive season.
So well said. Do you have larger commentary or reflections on the 600,000 Black women who have been pushed out of the workforce since January of 2025? It's astonishing the breadth of that number, the size.
Mhm.
I actually saw online that that's the equivalent of everyone in Baltimore being out of the workforce.
Mm.
Just not working, and I don't
Yeah.
know that there's any other demographic that we would be okay with that happening to, because I only hear Black women talking about the fact that Black women have been put out of the workforce in such droves. It's not headline news. I don't really see
Mhm.
it many places, and it is, obviously deeply hurtful and upsetting, but as someone who was part of that number for a while, what is your larger commentary on that?
I think, there's this sort of foundational reflection of, it's heartbreaking, it's sad, it's disappointing, it's frustrating that this is the reality. And I actually was just looking at some data this morning that says that those numbers continue to increase significantly from 2025 into 2026. But I think the first thing I would say is that growth doesn't always look the same, and that sometimes it does look like pause, reflection, and redesign. And for a lot of us, sometimes we've allowed for other people to tell us who we are, like as we've talked about, or attach, capabilities. And like no one knows what we are able to do and what we're capable of more than we are. We know the data before this data was making headline news was that Black women were the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in this country. They were the most educated. And so the reflection here is for all Black women, particularly those who have been in this moment. One, find the sun in the silence, because so many of us are carrying a lot of things. We're wearing 100 hats and juggling, and we don't always get the time. And so if we have the time, thinking about how to leverage that in the best way, acknowledging that there's stress, there's anxiety, there's all of those things that were absolutely true for me, but really taking stock and ownership in that reframe and that redesign. We own our character, but we also own our narrative and our story. Right? Black women have done it time and time again, and they will continue to get out in front and tell that story in the most powerful way. And the tides will shift as they always do,
They always
and they'll come out and they'll come out on the other side. But that's something that I'll say. I remember 2 weeks into my layoff, something shifted. The first 2 weeks there, I had anxiousness and confusion and frustration. And then going into week 3, I realized I've never had 3 weeks off before. I've never taken 3 weeks off of PTO. This has never happened. And also, this may never happen again. I don't know. And so that was the reframe for me. What am I going to do with this time? How am I going to leverage this time intentionally enough so that when the tide shifts, which it will, I am better positioned, I'm stronger, right? I have language, I have tools, all the things that I need to move forward.
You mentioned reframing as a tool that you use to stay grounded
Huh?
when you build is disrupted or during times of change. Are there other ways that you stay grounded, tools that you use?
Yeah, yeah. Community, as we've talked about, staying close to the people that you've worked with, people who know you, people who don't know you or are getting to know you. I always say sometimes when we forget who we are, we need someone to remind us. And so making sure that we don't retreat, but leave space to be reminded
Mm.
when you need that. I am someone who is faith-based, so always my faith. And I think the other piece is finding mentors and sponsors is critically important. When I'm swirling, when that begins to happen, I'm looking for opportunities to get into a development program. I'm looking to do coaching sessions. I'm looking to focus on the practical, tactical things that need to be done and separating my sort of feelings from action. Because sometimes our feelings could get us stuck. And so, how do I leverage my community to support me in the feelings, but also couple that with some practical, tactical things that I can do to inch forward and make movement, even in a time where things might be moving slower, right, at a much slower pace than usual, but I'm still moving.
Still moving, still inching forward, even if
One foot in front of the other.
one foot in front of the other. So as we wrap up today, are there any wisdom that you'd like to leave the Black Girl Ambition audience with, especially those first gen professionals who were listening,
Yeah.
who may need to hear it?
I would say authenticity is your superpower. And don't let anyone tell you that it is not. You know what I mean? Like, I think I think back to building my career early on and where I am now. And I feel like there was a significant shift when I truly embraced me and who I am, which included the things that I did not know, the acronyms that I did not understand, the shows that people were laughing about in the break room that I definitely didn't watch, right? And rather than saying, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about," or giggling through, like saying, I don't know. I'm not sure. No, I don't know. I've never heard that. I've never done that. I've never seen it." Something completely shifted in my career trajectory when I truly owned who I was, including what those perceived gaps were. I think it changed everything for me. So honest. And it sounds like cliche. It's so cliche. Some might even say cheesy, but it is so true. And I don't think that some of us realize that we're holding back until we're not. When you truly embrace who you are, and to your point, have tools like how to tie your work to impact and really own your narrative and reframe, there's no stopping you.
And it's not, it may sound cliche or cheesy, but it's honestly true. And it's really rare, to be honest with you, Fajani, because I think that so many people are hiding. Like they
Yeah,
hide or they shrink, they make themselves smaller out of fear. And the fear is based in things that are real. But I think that less often I see people who are doing what we're both describing.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think because it's a lot easier said than done.
It is.
It sounds simple, but you have to release yourself of a lot of stuff to get there. And so for the women who are not there yet, be patient, keep working at it. It'll come. It will come. And when it comes, you won't even realize that it's team. You'll look back and think, who was that
Who
girl?
was that? So, what as we close out today, what kind of workplace would you say you're committed to building next?
Yeah, I am committed to building a workplace that is deeply human, which means that it is dynamic, it is uncertain, but embraces uncertainty. It's not perfect, but it's real. And so I think that's the kind of workplace that I am committed to building, one that is deeply human, dynamic, imperfect, but committed to finding answers and doing better and evolution.
Where can my listeners find you on socials?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, Fadjanie Cadet. Follow me, connect with me there, or my website, meettheccxo.com. You all can also meet me there, which I'm really excited about. You can look for inquiries, speaking engagements, all of those things. But those are the sort of the top two, or email me, Fadjanie Cadet at meettheccxo.com also. But I am always open to conversation, learning, collaboration, all of those things.
Speaking of owning your narrative, that is very smart branding. Meettheccxo.com. Brilliant. What is your greatest ambition in life?
All right, so we're gonna take a turn here because my greatest ambition in life is not career centered. I think my greatest ambition in life is to raise a man who is and knows that he's deeply loved, who is kind, hardworking, and compassionate. I think that is my ultimate goal. That's what I work toward every single day. In addition to like the impact from a career perspective, that's how I want to be remembered. So my greatest ambition in life is to not be the perfect mother, but to raise a amazing human being.
You are incredible.
I've had so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Naya.
That's a wrap. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and join me again next week for another great conversation with a special guest. And remember, your ambition is your superpower. Keep dreaming big, building out loud, and living fully. Until next time, stay ambitious.
Overzealous when I'm thinking about the cash flow. I never had no handouts, just came natural. I've been tested so much, all these wrestlers nice.